One, virtually every social media platform, from TikTok to Facebook. For that matter, virtually every tech platform from Google to Apple. And every media institution outside of, well, Fox News and every government bureaucracy are dominated by one point of view. So why the existential freakout over one conversation between Elon Musk and Donald Trump that would get everyone to basically admit, hey, it's time to embrace censorship. It's time to break out the cops. It's time to arrest people who say things I don't like. 2, Waltz Harris, stealing camo, stealing valor, stealing football valor, stealing their everyman status. A conversation with the founder of Realtree. And 3, nuclear energy, the future. AI demands it. AI demands the energy. So why do we cede the future to China and Russia? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com and on the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, and always on demand wherever you get your audio entertainment, at Apple or on Spotify. Simply hit subscribe. Or if you prefer to watch us talk here on the Will Cain Show, become a member of our community and hang out every day live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Just head on over to YouTube, and in the text link underneath this live stream, expand it, see a button, and hit subscribe on YouTube. What's up, boys? What's up, Alicia? What's up to everyone back there in New York City?
What's going on, Will?
Howdy.
Hello.
It's, ask me how many times I've worked out since the New York City Navy SEAL swim.
How many times have you worked out, Will?
That's right. 2-a-days. Not even once a day. 0.
Riding high.
And the reason that I bring that up, the reason I tell you about my laziness over the past 3 days, is that it's only to highlight the power of vanity. Vanity is a very powerful motivator. Knowing that you have to be on national television shirtless will get you in the gym. And all of a sudden, I got nothing on the calendar. The only motivation that I have right now is, and you guys know this, the hardest part of working out is getting started. The hardest part of any diet is getting started. It's so much easier to keep the train rolling, once you have the momentum. So there's a little part of me is like, I can feel it. I've downshifted from 5th gear into 4th gear, and that can easily slide into 3rd. And before you know it, this thing's in neutral. And so I got to get it going before I lose all momentum. But I'm going to have to find something to replace vanity.
I mean, you could always just get more of a tan, and that just fixes all those problems.
That's the other problem here. The tan is going to cover up the slide. It's like a false momentum, It's like having a wind at your back. You're like, I haven't downshifted into 3rd gear. Feel that wind? And it's like, nah, man, that tan's fading with it. So I got to get back up there. I'm going to be up there in New York City this evening, so maybe I'll be getting into the gym. In the hotel gym. I'm not going to join Young Establishment James in the Fox gym. I have no desire to see Brett Baer on the treadmill. So I got no excuse. I got to get it together. By the way, speaking of a challenge, last night I guest hosted for Jesse Waters Primetime, and I got into a little bit of what I would describe as a slap fight. I got into a little bit of debate with Democratic strategist Nomiki Konst. This is what went down when we got into a fight about free speech. Not only Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris put that out today. So my question for you is, should they now be deplatformed?
He called the people the Proud Boys, which is what I think they were referring to as Nazis, as very fine people. So let's make that very clear.
His words were literally this. No,
on the anniversary of Heather Heyer's death.
I'm not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis. His words were literally, as I just quoted, I am not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis. He said those exact words.
He was talking about the Proud Boys, but we see them as the same people. So I would, you trust the FBI. I hope you do.
He didn't even mention
do you trust
Proud
the CIA?
Boys. That's you reading that in.
Do you trust the NYPD in New York? I mean, these are the folks who are there to investigate threats of violence. If you get in the mail, If you get a phone call, a threatening phone call, they investigate phone calls. The FBI looks into terrorist attacks. So why can't you do that on Twitter? The tech companies have an obligation to oversee this.
Well, then, according to that standard, both Kamala Harris's campaign.
That's what a lot of people said to me on social media. Okay, that's good. That'll do. That was a debate about whether or not we should embrace the European standard of censoring free speech. Now, boys in New York, Alicia, there's a couple of takeaways from that moment last night on Fox News. First of all, my social media became incredibly active, markedly active. And I texted Tinfoil last night and I said, here's a couple of things that I want to learn from this moment. I think it's needed. I actually think we need to have more back and forth between left and right. I think that it's all too rarely represented. And I would like to pride myself as someone here, both on this program and just in my career at large, who's very, very open to that debate. And I felt like I saw that in my social media. Now, I will say there is a percentage of the audience that doesn't want to hear from an opposing point of view at all and will criticize me for bringing them on. But I think this is part of who I am and what I believe. The question is, should we invite Namiki here onto the Will Cain Show? And I am not convinced on that answer. This is the second time I've had a debate with Namiki. And I mean it as no huge personal insult, but there's a huge amount of crosstalk, and it feels like debating a press release. I am fire-hosed talking points. And I don't know that it is in the end productive. I don't know. Tinfoil, you grabbed a comment from somebody saying, thanks, I learned absolutely nothing in that debate. So I do wonder if we invite her into this decompressed environment here on the Will Cain Show, if there's a little less heat and a little more light in a conversation with Namiki.
This is something I struggle with because I don't think a lot of people on the left are sincere in their beliefs. I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but like it came across that way for her, where it's like she just kind of like repeats the same words. It's kind of like what I used to do when I was younger, and I would listen to right-wing talk radio, and I just repeat the same things I heard. And I think like when we had a conversation with Destiny, that was productive. I don't know if it would be as productive with her.
Well, and the problem is when I talk about a fire hose, I will tell you, and the overwhelming majority of the commentary was positive. Good job, Will. You really handled that debate with some patience and the appropriate amount of aggressiveness. But there were some who thought I was not aggressive enough. And there is a quantity of points made that become impossible to rebut. Like the Proud Boys thing. That's just a falsehood. Like, I don't even know what she's talking about. I mean, the debate at large was about whether or not we should adopt a European Union standard of more censorship, which does include cops potentially showing up at your door to arrest you for things that you say online. And I said to her as a rebuttal, well, then should Joe Biden be arrested? Should Kamala Harris be visited by police? Because both yesterday repeated the verifiable lie, fact-check lie, that Donald Trump praised Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people. She pivoted, you could hear Two-A-Days and Young Establishment James, she pivoted to the Proud Boys. But the Proud Boys were never mentioned by Donald Trump. So she just, I don't know, conjured that up out of thin air. She also, by the way, just fire hose stuff at me like, she mangled the metaphor, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater as a standard for free speech, which is not a standard for free speech. It's just not. It was mentioned in the Supreme Court case in like the 1940s. It was overruled in late 1960s, 1969 in Brandenburg, which was a Supreme Court case that set the limits of free speech as direct incitement to violence. But my point is, that's two things she said while fire hosing 100 at me, and I have to pick and choose my battles in 5 minutes on television.
Right, and it's really hard to talk over someone, and she was just saying the same talking point that you've heard and that you knew was nonsense.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like someone, and you see this a lot on TV, where they're not necessarily listening to the conversation and having a back and forth. It's more, I have these 4 or 5 things I want to say, and I'm just going to say them no matter what's said to me. I'd be curious to see if that would be different, if we could see how she came to those conclusions in a full conversation, as opposed to just what those conclusions are.
Count me as curious. That's a good word. I'm curious about a bigger, deeper, more relaxed conversation with No Mickey. And the reason why is I don't want my brain, I don't want my point of view to become flabby in the same way I'm talking to you about my workout. I don't want to not exercise. And the only way to exercise my point of view and my brain is by getting it challenged by those who disagree. I am not in the 20, 30% that get mad when I hear something of disagreement. I actually consider it a good workout. And so I want to have that here. Maybe that's something we can accomplish with No Mickey, but we'll continue to seek that out. I will seek that out on the Fox News channel, and I will seek that out here on the Will Cain Show. But for now, let's dive into the subject. Let's get into the new embrace of censorship with story number 1. The new embrace of censorship is an old return to shut up. It's just shocking, I guess, to hear the honesty. The offending moment that has now shaken everybody back into authenticity is that Donald Trump appeared on a 2-hour Twitter space with Elon Musk in a free-flowing conversation, less of an interview in Musk's description and more of a conversation. The former leader of the free world and arguably the planet's smartest man spitballed ideas, workshopped our problems. And for a moment, it's worth just stepping back and marveling at what I just said. A presidential candidate sat down with arguably the world's smartest man, a guy who reinvented the car industry and pivoted towards electrical vehicles, who's pioneered private space travel, who's the richest man on the planet. Donald Trump took on a conversation, unscripted, no pre-vetted questions, and batted the tennis ball back and forth with Elon Musk. While it's been 24 days since Kamala Harris was confirmed the Democratic nominee for president, and 24 days without a press conference, without an interview, without a question about her policies, her past, or her candidacy. Nothing for Kamala Harris. That, simple side by side, is incredible. Now, in response to that 2-hour conversation on Twitter Spaces, the entirety, and if that's hyperbolic or a slight exaggeration, my apologies, but virtually the entirety of the approved journalistic media sphere, almost in unison, yelled, "Shut up." I give you Washington Post, a Washington Post reporter asking a question of White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre.
Elon Musk is slated to interview Donald Trump tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have in sort of stopping that, or stopping the spread of that, or sort of intervening in that? Some of that was about campaign misinformation, but it's a wider thing, right?
Yeah, no, and you've heard us talk about this many times from here, about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but
that is the media asking for the heavy hand of censorship. What can you do to intervene, says the Washington Post, to stop this conversation? Well, a former Twitter boss writing in The Guardian had this to say. He wrote a column saying, if Elon Musk is not going to listen, well, one of the things we can do is break out the handcuffs. Here's the headline. As an ex-Twitter boss, I have a way to grab Elon Musk's attention. If he wants to keep stirring unrest, get an arrest warrant. Former Twitter boss saying arrest Elon Musk for this type of conversation over free speech. That is exactly, by the way, what's happening over in Europe. Those aren't empty threats. People are being arrested in the United Kingdom over things they tweet or they post on Facebook regarding the riots they're currently experiencing over there in the UK. If you post something that is deemed inciting, if you post something that is racially insensitive, you can be arrested. You will be arrested. People have been arrested in the UK. And that's the type of approach to free speech that so many now on the left are asking for when it comes to America. And my question for you then is twofold. A, who's going to be the arbiter of truth? Who do you empower? Who is going to be the censorship boss? Who tells us what's over the line? Who tells us what's disinformation? Who tells us what's worthy of censorship? Who tells us what's worthy of arrest? Because here's question B. Should Joe Biden be deplatformed? Should Kamala Harris be arrested? The reason why is what I asked their Democratic strategist, Nomiki Konst, while filling in for Jesse Waters Primetime. Just yesterday, marking an anniversary, both put out a tweet, used X to say that Donald Trump called Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. Fact check, false. It's a lie. It's a hoax. It's disinformation. So, should they be arrested? Should they be censored? My suspicion is the answer to that is going to be no, because whoever you pick to be the arbiter of truth will be someone who has no interest in telling us the truth. Here's a good example. This is today on CNN a headline, or actually it's the New York Times. It's repeated on CNN.com. It's on your screen there. You can see New York Times. Hunter Biden asked State Department for help securing Burisma project in 2016. So just leave that on the screen. I want you to think about it for just one moment. It's now August of 2024, and the New York Times is reporting that Hunter Biden asked the State Department for help in securing a Burisma project from 2016. Now, for years, people on the right, people interested in the truth, people that work at Fox have been highlighting the dirty business ties between Hunter Biden and businesses in Ukraine or China, and offering up evidence, although circumstantial, evidence that Hunter Biden has leveraged his last name, his influence and connections within Washington, D.C., and possibly his relationship with his father as vice president and then as president to secure contracts to enrich several members within the family, several Bidens. That was dismissed for years with headlines like what you see on the left side of your screen from The Intercept, which said that suggestions of dirty business dealings within the Bidens is, quote, absolute nonsense. So, who's going to be in charge of telling us what is the truth? People that for 4 years told us this was absolute nonsense, and now that Joe Biden is no longer the nominee for president, are willing to step away from their propaganda and admit the truth? The only way to arrive at the truth is through unfettered free speech. And while one point of view dominates the entirety of social media, the entirety of tech, the entirety of the media, and the entirety of government bureaucracy, maybe we shouldn't be so afraid. And in fact, maybe we should praise one 2-hour unscripted conversation between a presidential candidate and the world's richest billionaire. A conversation between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. We've talked about whether or not the Harris-Waltz campaign has trafficked in stolen valor. Have they also trafficked in stolen football success or stolen everyman status? We're going to be joined by the CEO of Realtree coming up on The Will Cain Show.
Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts. With the nomination official and a running mate picked.
We have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against.
Vice President Kamala Harris moves on to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, and Fox News Audio has complete Democracy 24 coverage, hosted by Jared Halpern and Jessica Rosenthal, along with a team of Fox News reporters and analysts. The Democratic National Convention, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Listen at foxnewsradio.com or on the Fox News app. From the Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know, having spent the weekend with some of America's most incredible warriors, having spent the weekend with some 100-odd Navy SEALs, I find myself thinking a lot about warfare, about battles. And I do wonder what the future of warfare includes and whether or not propaganda and a battle for the truth are not integral to the war for our future in America. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand. Just hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify or on YouTube, and you can come hang out. Join the community here on The Will Cain Show. Joining me now is the creator of Realtree and Advantage brands of camouflage. He's the host of Realtree Outdoors television show, Legends of the Outdoors Hall of Fame inductee. It's Bill Jordan on The Will Cain Show. Hey, Bill. Nice to meet you.
Will, good afternoon. I did get a chance to watch you swim the other day.
You did? Okay. I wasn't in camo.
I'll give you a vote for the willingness part.
I'm taking it, the performance not as worthy of praise, but the willingness part, I have earned some level of respect. Thank you. I wasn't wearing camo except for that God gave me virtually, you know, the camouflage I was born with there to take on the Hudson.
Well, you were very impressive getting in the water.
Well, thank you, Bill. I've been wearing Realtree since I was in high school, which was in the 1990s when I first got into first duck hunting, then deer hunting, all across Texas, North Texas, Central Texas. And so your brand has been a big part of my life. I think anybody who's been hunting over the past 30-some-odd years. And I'm glad to have you on the show today. So, you know, you were in the news in the past week because right after Tim Waltz was announced as vice presidential candidate to accompany Kamala Harris, they put out a hat, Waltz Harris campaign, and the logo was emblazoned right over one of your patterns, right over Realtree. What did you think of that? What did you think about the use of Realtree?
Well, you know, the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand, you know, we are a camouflage manufacturer and we sell to a lot of different hat companies. And as you know, a lot of the hat companies and T-shirt companies, they buy blank hats and people come in and they put an order in. It could be Joe's Barbecue or whatever slogan they want on there. So this was certainly the case here. You know, they had the ability to go in and buy blank camo hats and put the, the Harris logo on it. And, you know, the one thing we found out too, they're using 3 or 4 different other camo patterns, just not Realtree, throughout their campaign. And so, just looking into it and just trying to make sure everything was good is, they're not our hats. We don't manufacture hats, but we do the fabric. And so hat companies are able to go out and put, different company logos on it. So this was certainly the case here. And even on the Republican side, I know that, Trump had some hats, not only on our camo pattern, but other camo patterns as well.
Well, the reason that we're talking about this is, if we're being upfront and honest, is that you got some blowback for the use of the Realtree pattern in the Harris-Waltz campaign. Now, before we get into that blowback, I want to help establish this for anyone watching or listening that might not understand. Realtree is very identifiable. You've had a pattern that, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, you developed. I don't know when you first started putting this pattern together. I think you were in high school when you first started designing Realtree. And it's a unique pattern, and you have many now. But the original, correct me if I'm wrong, very woodsy, And what stood out for anyone is, your original options were, when it came to camouflage, was sort of the Army patterns, right? Green and black, splotchy, blended together. And yours was essentially a replication of nature. It looked like where you were actually going out to hunt. And because of that, everyone knows Realtree.
Correct. That's the case, certainly. I have a passion for the outdoors, and I've always been an outdoorsman, grew up in an outdoor family, and certainly hunted and fished all my life. And so, that original Realtree pattern was just something I wanted to look like where I hunted. And, I've been a bow hunter for a long, long time, and duck hunter, as you say early, as you are. And I've hunted a little bit of everything. So I just, the military patterns back in the day, not that they weren't good, but they were the only options that we had as outdoorsmen and hunters. And so I created the Realtree original pattern to look more like where I hunted in situations. And it just by the leap of faith, didn't know if it was going to do well, sell or not. But, thank goodness we made it into a brand. So we've been very fortunate and blessed to be a part of the outdoor community.
How long did, just out of curiosity, as an entrepreneurial story, Bill, how long did it take to take off? You put that pattern together and overnight success?
No. I think the interesting thing with that, when I came with a pattern, there wasn't a blueprint to follow, back in the day, Will, this is the road to success or whatever. So it's just kind of a gut feeling all the way through. And so, early on, I believed in the mission, and it was hopefully the consumer and the retailers would as well. So, the first 3 or 4 years were very difficult, to be perfectly honest with you. There was a lot of learning experience and trying to learn the industry and so forth. And after about the 4th or 5th year in, I could see a turn, where everything was going to a positive side, and, where the company started to grow, where we could, hire people. And so, from that perspective, been very lucky. And, the thing about the outdoor community, period, hunting, fishing, sports, it brings so many people together. And, and I tell you, I've been so fortunate to meet so many nice people, from, country singers to baseball players to football players. We have a passion into NASCAR, and, some of my best buddies come from all those sports. And I know you're a very active sports person, and it's just, it's been a great thing for me and my family and our employees. And hopefully people, enjoy the patterns.
And certainly it looks like the Harris-Waltz campaign enjoyed the pattern. And so that brings us to this conversation somewhat. You got some blowback. So tell me what you want to make clear to everyone. Now, I can make some assumptions, Bill, and you can correct me if my assumptions are what assumptions often are, something that makes an ass out of you and me. But the outdoor community, while it's inclusive of everyone and brings people together, obviously has a very conservative market as a huge percentage of its customer base. And now here is Harris-Waltz using a Realtree pattern, and that causes you some blowback at Realtree. So what is it you want people to understand about what's happened here with Realtree?
Well, I think from the outdoor side of it, whether you're Republican or Democrat, is for everybody. And I think that's the most important thing for all of us to remember. It's whatever side you choose or pick, that's your personal choice and preference, and that should be that way. And so from the Realtree perspective is, our customers, we don't know who buys our patterns, but certainly I know Democrats that hunt and enjoy the outdoors, hunting, fishing, sports, as Republicans do. So, the camouflage, it just goes both ways. It's just not, one party or this party. So I think everybody just got to make their decisions of what they would like to do. And, and listen to you early in your openings and so forth. I think for all of us, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you just hopefully people will just get to the issues that where we can make our minds up as individuals. And, I think that's all. I think the throwing back and forth, if that's their style, it's not mine. I just like for everybody to stick with issues from a personal side.
You brought up sports. I see you've got your Ole Miss cardboard cutout behind you there in the offices.
Did you see that?
I mean,
I put it where you could see it. Unless over this shoulder now.
Yeah, it doesn't look coincidental, Bill. It looks like it was placed in the right spot for this interview. And I will tell you, I was just reading this morning Stuart Mandel's SEC prediction for this upcoming college football season, and Georgia, he had predicted as winning the SEC. And then he had 3 teams coming in tied for second. I think it was 3 teams at 10-2. Those were Alabama, the University of Texas, and Ole Miss, all coming in at 10-2. So we might have ourselves a little bit of a problem here this season, Will and Bill in the SEC.
Well, the Will and Bill thing, I've already figured this out. And so, we don't play each other during the regular season. And so if we are lucky enough, and Ole Miss, Texas is already there. We know that. So if Ole Miss happens to make it to the championship game, we may just have to sit together. So, somewhere.
I love that.
I love that. I've got seats, I've got tickets, and you do as well. So we'll just have that. We'll just chat with each other all through the football season.
That felt like, especially the initial compliment to the University of Texas, that felt like a male sports trash-talking version of Bless Your Heart. He gave me the compliment of Texas is already there. It was too sweet and saccharine to the point where I'm like, it's coming with some big sharp edge to the other side of this knife. But if the only edge I have to deal with is an invitation to the SEC championship game to sit with Bill Jordan of Realtree to watch Texas and Ole Miss, count me in, Bill.
Well, no, we're going to do that. We have another common tie with your love for Texas and mine for Ole Miss. I was fortunate enough and blessed, and one of my former teammates was Archie Manning. And so you've got Arch Manning out there. And so, Archie and I have that thing going on. So you do have a Manning on your field.
That's true. And he will, I think that Archie, or Arch rather, will be our guy next year. By the time we get, who knows, by the time we get to that SEC championship game, Quinn Ewers could get hurt, and you may have to have a little conflict of interest between Ole Miss and one of your old college teammates and his grandson. But I appreciate you being here on the Will Cain Show today, Bill, and I look forward to meeting you in person. I look forward to this sports rivalry, and I look forward to once again, hopefully very soon, donning some Realtree.
Well, I certainly do appreciate it, and all the best to you, and hopefully we can maybe do a duck blind sometime this year.
I'd love it. Bill Jordan of Realtree. Thanks for being on the Will Cain Show.
Thank you, Will.
All right, coming up, speaking of stolen everyman status, and people have talked about perhaps a little bit of stolen valor, I have a question for the guys in the militia about whether or not there's any stolen football credibility. That's coming up next on the Will Cain Show.
I'm Emily Campagno. This month, the Fox True Crime Podcast presents Crimes on Campus.
More pledges, more money, more colleges, until it was a multi-million-dollar drug network.
You'll be joining me on college and university campuses all across the country as I share chilling stories of scandal, corruption, and murder.
Brutalized 5 students over 3 nights.
New episodes available every Tuesday this month. Listen and follow at foxtruecrime.com.
The Democratic National Convention, live on Fox News.
Do we believe in the promise of America?
Get Democracy 24 coverage you won't see anywhere else. From the #1 name in news. Plus, special analysis from the voices America trusts. There's a reason why more Democrats, more independents, and more Republicans watch Fox News than any other news network. The Democratic National Convention, starting August 19th on Fox News Channel. America is watching.
It's time to take the quiz. 5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to the quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
Why do we let China and Russia dominate the most important energy source of the future, one that is going to be taxed, needed with the demands of AI? Why would we let Russia and China take the lead when it comes to nuclear? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com and on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify. Hit subscribe on YouTube and hang out with us. Join the community here on the Will Cain Show. I want to go back. I have a question for the Willisha. So I got a call this morning. Yeah, I got a call from a buddy. And I hadn't thought about this. I actually thought about it a little bit because of our friend Pete Hegseth brought this up on the show last week. So the Harris-Waltz campaign is leaning into Coach. They're calling Tim Waltz Coach Waltz, not Governor Waltz, not Congressman Waltz. They're calling him Coach Waltz. Talking a lot about his high school football state championship at Mankato West in Minnesota. And they're really, really leaning in to Coach Waltz. So I got a call from a friend this morning. He said to me, I have a question for you. If you are the defensive coordinator on a high school football team, are you the guy that gets to claim credit for raising a generation of men, winning a state championship, and forever being their coach? And I said to him, yeah, I don't think it's wrong for him to continue to go around with the brand of Coach Waltz. Like, I think even if he was the defensive line coach, he gets to be Coach Waltz to those kids. Now, there might be a line. There might be a line where it's like, I won the high school state championship. My guys won the high school state championship. We said this in the halftime locker room at the state championship game in Minnesota. There might be a line where you're over covering yourself in glory based upon your position. But I said this to my friend. I don't think, for example, if I'm comparing what he's done with his military service compared to what he's done with his coaching career, he's performed some sort of stolen football valor, stolen sports valor by leaning into Coach Waltz. What do you guys think? Does the fact that he's defensive coordinator undercut the narrative they're trying to build of Coach Waltz?
I think it's 50-50. This one could really go either way, and it kind of depends on what sort of defensive coordinator was he? Was he like really involved, or was he kind of just on this? I think we got to ask the former players because the locker room, they know if he's legit or not.
And I also think the players can call him that. I don't think Kamala calling him that or anything like that. I think it just stops with the guys who played for him. And I think that's where the valor is. And I'm okay with it, but, who am I to say?
Coach is weird, tinfoil. Coach is one of those that I've always been confused by. Both why you always get to remain coach and where coach ranks in your branded prefixes. So like Tommy Tuberville, senator, coach. If Tommy Tuberville walks in, I think you have to say senator. I think it's an act of disrespect if I say Coach Tuberville, right? I have to say Senator Tuberville. And same way, it should be Governor Waltz, not Coach Waltz. I've never understood how Coach joined the ranks of doctor and lieutenant colonel and senator as something you retain for the rest of your life.
I think 3-year letterman would disagree with you about that on Twitter. But, when it comes to, you look at Bill Belichick, right? He single-handedly won a Super Bowl for the Giants as a defensive coordinator. So, a defensive coordinator could have that much, power. He probably had more power as a coach for that high school football team than he did as governor of Minnesota, to be fair. Because he didn't do anything for Minnesota.
But you just used the NFL and the greatest coach of all time in the NFL. The question becomes, what is the barrier? How low can we go before you claiming the mantle of coach and champion becomes embarrassing for you? So let's just say this for a moment. I once coached not one, but 2 of my son's futsal teams to New York City championships in both, I believe it would have been, let's call it the U7 and U10 age group. I mean, those boys put on medals, and my coaching was integral to this. Now, I could put together a group of at least 6 boys to say, Will was absolutely our championship level coach. Now, if I go out there on a stage tomorrow running for public office and call myself Coach Cain, I think that we're all going to go, that's not right.
Yeah,
that's
relax, pal.
So yeah.
It would be
by the
Coach
way, I think
Wills.
you guys are saying that. I think you guys are saying that because it's not even soccer, it's futsal. So, but I've established the bottom. I've established it's the indoor soccer version on hard court. It's a Brazilian sport. It's awesome. I love it. Futsal, incredible sport. But I've established the bottom. Now you've established tinfoil the top. Bill Belichick is defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Somewhere in between our two examples is a moment where you go, all right, stop. And the question is, on which side of that tipping point is Tim Waltz as defensive coordinator of a high school state championship team?
So I think it has to be D1 football. I think that's where it stops. A D1 football coach, any position coach, any quarterback coach, line coach, that's fine. Below that, I think that's where you kind of cut it off.
When we email with Tommy Tuberville's team, they call him coach, and I think if you've coached Auburn, you probably can get away with that.
Okay, but you both have set the standard. It's interesting, by the way, that Tuberville's people don't say the senator, they say coach.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have this conversation with Tuberville. Can we get Tommy Tuberville on to settle this debate?
We're working on it.
But what you both have just said, but what you guys have said is Waltz is over the line. I mean, you drew it at D1. And by the way, I'm not as strict as you guys. I think that a high school coach gets to keep that. And I think even a high school defensive coordinator gets to brag about his state championship. I do not fault Waltz. I don't think it's stolen football valor. I don't fault Waltz for pointing at this as a big moment in his life. I don't. I think he's closer to Belichick than he is Coach Cain in the futsal league in New York City.
That is a big jump, but you're right.
He's over the line to his own credit, to his own benefit. He's to the positive. He gets to be Coach Waltz. All right. We've established over the past couple of months in talking about the growing market that is artificial intelligence, the energy needs that will be required, which will tax the entire system in order to power artificial intelligence. So why not lean in to nuclear energy? Why cede the field to China and Russia? Let's bring in Ed McGinnis. He's the president and CEO of Curio, now here on the Will Cain Show. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Will. I won't say coach.
Thank you. You can say it. It's on me not to correct you, but I just can't go around introducing myself and bragging of my championship and calling myself coach.
Right. The only ones that call me coach is the 8 and 9-year-old basketball kids that I coach, and occasionally they see me after all these years and they say, "Hey, coach," but that's where I draw the line.
So those kids can continue to call you that for the rest of your life. And sadly, I don't think any of those boys I coached will continue to call me coach. Ed, I want to talk to you about a subject you're an expert in, and I know that you're passionate about as well, and that's nuclear energy. Tell me just the state of play. Like, where are we in the United States when it comes to our embrace of nuclear energy, and where are our adversaries like China and Russia when it comes to nuclear?
State of play is that we were the pioneers in nuclear. We gave birth to nuclear, going all the way back to the Manhattan Project. And in the 50s, the peaceful uses of nuclear energy led the world there. But the sad state of affairs is that Russia and China are eating our lunch in nuclear. They're dominating the nuclear market. We have gone from the world's leader in nuclear to allowing our nuclear fuel supply infrastructure to absolutely deteriorate to the point that most Americans would be shocked to know that we are nearly 100% dependent on foreign suppliers for our nuclear fuel. And still to this day, over 20% of our nuclear fuel comes from Russia. The president, with bipartisan legislation, recently passed a ban on Russian nuclear imports. However, there is a caveat. where it allows the continuation for the next 2 years through waivers to maintain the current 20% dependence. And you know why? The primary reason why is if Russia cut off the 3 or 4 shipments of fuel coming to us every year, we would probably have to initiate rolling brownouts. That's how dangerously dependent we've allowed ourselves to be, even with the adversary. So we have got to rebuild our nuclear infrastructure supply chain, including dealing with our so-called waste, which is anything but waste.
So Ed, please forgive my ignorance on this. How is nuclear energy importable? How are we bringing it in from Russia? I can certainly understand how fossil fuel energy ships. How do you? My stupid understanding would have been that nuclear power plants are hooked up directly to a grid and supply local energy needs. How do you ship and transport nuclear energy?
Well, that's how it should be, and that's how it used to be. We used to be fully independent, being able to build our reactors, operate, produce our fuel, and then manage our nuclear waste, even recycling it. So there are 2 key components, Will, to fuel supply when you produce fuel. One is the uranium, natural, in the ground that you mine. We have large deposits of uranium that we have mined over the years, but we have allowed that industry to absolutely wither. And in fact, once upon a time, not long ago, we had large Russian ownership of the uranium mines and finally got them out of the back of our woods. But the bottom line is there's 2 pieces of nuclear fuel: the uranium that you mine, and then the real secret sauce, the real effort is enriching it. And these gas centrifuges, we even hear about Iran, the gas centrifuges. That's how you take the natural uranium and you enrich it to concentrate it to a level that can then be put in these fuel pellets that are put into a reactor. So the uranium comes from all over the world. Kazakhstan is the largest producer, Australia, Canada, and even Russia produces some. We produce the U.S. uranium, this vaunted uranium industry we have, last year produced 0.4%. The second part, and then the most important part, is the enrichment. Russia is the dominant enricher. They enrich 47% of the world's enriched fuel. So what happens is that the uranium is traded on the world market, and then the uranium will go to Russia, and then Russia, for example, will then enrich it, and then they put it in fuel form, and then they ship it on ships back to the United States. So the sum total of about 20% of what we rely on for our fuel from Russia comes probably in about 3 shipments a year. If Putin decided to stop the shipments right now, we're in a world of hurt, we're scrambling, and we will probably have impacts, maybe even rolling brownouts, as some experts say.
So that's fascinating. That's an education for me. I didn't understand it. It makes a lot of sense. First, in the raw materials, which you can import and export across the world, and then in the enriched uranium, which I did not know was something that was an active trading market across the world. So one more quick question before I get into why and what we can do. Where, out of curiosity, geographically, are America's biggest uranium deposits?
Out west, mostly northwest, southwest. We have uranium deposits in various parts of even Arizona, up in Utah, and in the traditional mining areas where there is uranium and also coal and others. We know how to do it. The uranium mining industry is awesome. I love those guys. They have been absolutely underappreciated and undersupported over the years. Fortunately, there is some that have that survived, but there are only 4 in situ leach, what we call uranium mines producing now. We used to have hundreds, if not thousands. So the good news is it's not too late, but Russia and China are dominating. And this is not just an energy issue. This is a geostrategic issue. Nuclear is unlike any other energy sector. It's dual use, long strategic terms. When Russia sells a nuclear reactor to a country, for example, they're building reactors in Turkey right now. They're building reactors in Egypt. Even in the face of Ukraine, they are securing more orders of reactors than anyone else on the planet. And when they build a reactor, this ends up being a 60 to 100-year strategic relationship and, frankly, a dependent relationship. That's why we need to rebuild our capability. We must have energy supply independence. We need homegrown production and homegrown management. Most people don't realize the nuclear, we have the largest fleet in the world of nuclear reactors still to this day. China's hot on our heels. We have the oldest average age of the reactors, though. They're aging out quickly, and we don't have any real numbers in a pipeline. One of the reasons is because this so-called waste issue. What utility exec CEO is going to order a nuclear reactor knowing that 20% of our fuel comes from Russia, knowing that we don't even have a plan for waste? But our nuclear waste is not waste, and that's the biggest, misunderstood fact. Only 4% of the energy value of that so-called waste, when it comes out of a U.S. nuclear reactor that's sitting on the pad stranded right now, only 4% of the energy value has been used. There is enough remaining energy value in our so-called nuclear waste to meet our electricity needs in the U.S. for 150 years. So we know how to do it. It's a national treasure. We're just wasting it away, and it makes no sense. We decided to stop reprocessing all the way back into Carter.
So my guess, Ed, and I'm just going to spitball this because I want this to be a conversation as well as an interview, is why we have been so hostile to nuclear. One of the issues I would assume is the waste issue you just talked about, because it runs into a NIMBY issue, not in my backyard. Nobody wants to hold the waste. No one wants to store the waste. And by the way, that NIMBY issue is also going to be in effect for building new reactors. And my suspicion would be this has been the climb in the United States ever since 3 Mile Island. Anytime there's been a kind of nuclear alarm, it has resulted in nobody wants a nuclear reactor in their neighborhood. There's also, I'm just thinking about the headwinds to nuclear. And I don't get this one, but the green energy world is opposed to nuclear. And I don't know why, but they are opposed. And for that matter, so may be the fossil fuels, because they want to dominate. They want to dominate the energy market. I'm sure they see nuclear as a competitor. And I'm thinking about all the reasons why we've run into not just, hurdles, but hostility when it comes to nuclear.
So certainly the waste issue is a major alarm call for environmentalists. And look, the fact is, we know how to recycle this. My company, we have a new environmentally sustainable approach to recycling, where we know how to recycle in a way that the French and others aren't doing right now, where it's an environmental mess. They use an acid-based process to get at some of the remaining products and then create a much larger amount of waste. So the environmentalists have been opposed to nuclear, in part, not just because of the safety concerns of reactors, although they're running safe now in the US, but the waste. Did you know, Will, that 11 states in the United States still have laws on the book that bars or restricts nuclear primarily because of the nuclear waste issue? And you're right about coal. In the 70s, our biggest competitor was coal. You can see, pictures of signs protesting no nuclear with the coal industry's emblem on the bottom. So it's a combination of failure to come up with an environmentally sustainable approach to nuclear, where when we have the fuel coming out, it's not treated as waste. We recycle it. My company, we have this dry process where when we're done recycling it, we will only have about 4% of the original waste left. Now, what's being done around the world, France, Russia, Japan, they're using this arcane recycling process that goes all the way back to the Manhattan Project. They use it's got major environmental issues because they're using that acid base. The largest cleanup project in the United States nuclear is Hanford Tanks in Washington State. That's a result of this acid-based process. So we're trying to come into the United States and help the U.S. rebuild its energy nuclear infrastructure, so we're not dangerously reliant on Russia and China, but do it in an environmentally sustainable way and a secure way. Because remember, President Carter was the first to ban recycling over security concerns that it could be used as a Trojan horse for countries like North Korea, which they've done with recycling, reprocessing, Iran and others. using this dual-use technology. So they're right to be concerned about the environmental impact, security, but we know how to do it. We have the tech now, and we're partnering with the U.S. government right now to accelerate bringing that in. But at the end of the day, it takes the national will of Congress. And if we don't wake up and say this is unsat, we're never going to get there.
So one more question, driven out of my own curiosity. I've read before that one of the things that holds us back in the United States is that for whatever reason, and perhaps it's regulatory, when we build a reactor, these gigantic, huge plants that take decades to come online. Whereas the French and others build much smaller footprint nuclear reactors that do what we talked about earlier, furnish supply of energy for a smaller geographic area, may run in a town or a region. And so what they end up with is a bunch of smaller nuclear sites, where in the United States, we focus on building these mega sites, and that takes forever for us to get back online with nuclear.
So, yeah, well, what you're talking about are the new small modular reactors that are more flexible. You can scale it to large, or you can distribute it and have it smaller, dedicated. Those can even be used for like these large AI centers now dedicated. The only country that has built the small modular reactor thus far is China. France has not. France has been absolutely in love with the large reactors. They also have their problems. Flamanville trying to build, and it took a long time, us with Vogtle. But at the end of the day, those are older Generation 3 reactors that are not able to be flexed in load follow. They're not able to be sized. What we're all about now is bringing in the small modular reactors that can also be scaled up large, and then also micro reactors. That's happening in the U.S. We have a bow wave of reactors coming in, but there's a missing piece of the puzzle. Where's the order book for all these reactors where there's billions of U.S. dollars coming in right now? Bill Gates' reactor in Wyoming, Natrium, and others. Right. Why don't we see a large order book? I would argue because what CEO is going to take the risk of ordering a reactor, given the fragility of the nuclear fuel supply chain, our dependence on foreign suppliers instead of domestic, and a lack of a reasonable way to deal with the so-called waste? So my company wants to come in and bring all of the above. So bring the waste management, bring the fuel and the reactors, and we're hoping other companies in the U.S. do it. We've got to reestablish, or we are going to be in a far worse situation where our dependence is going to be weaponized by Russia and others, because the worst thing we could do is build more reactors and then become more dependent on foreign sources of fuel, more dependent on not knowing what to do with the waste. So we've got to do the whole thing. Congress is doing a fairly decent job, but I think they're missing sight of at least the last piece, that waste. Russia uses the waste issue to its advantage. Even in Iran, they're building Bushehr reactor in Iran. They provide the fuel, and guess what they do? They take that so-called waste back from Iran, and they use that as a business model to lock up Turkey, to lock up Egypt. So we've got to rebuild our capabilities, and the stakes are not just in energy security, it is geostrategic.
I'm fascinated by it, Ed. I'm fascinated by what you're doing at Curio. I'm fascinated by this entire industry, not just from a national security perspective, not just from an energy need perspective when it comes to understanding how AI will tax our system. But for anyone listening, I'm just fascinated by it as well from an entrepreneurial perspective. I just think it's a hugely untapped area out there that, for example, I would love my kids to learn a lot more about. But I also understand the handcuffs that are placed on the entrepreneurial spirit in this industry based upon government regulations. So it's a fascinating conversation. Ed McGinnis right here with us of Curio. And I appreciate you being on the Will Cain Show.
Thank you for your time, Will.
All right. Appreciate it. There he goes. Coach to his players, as I am. Coach to my players. As I am coach to the Willisha, but only to the Willisha. But I'll let him be coach. He can be governor, or he can be Coach Waltz. That's going to do it for today here on the Will Cain Show. I'll see you same time, same place, right here again tomorrow.